Nikola Tesla was one of the most enigmatic but least known scientists of the past century, inventor of both electricity and radio. So why did he die in poverty? Was he silenced?
Nikola Tesla created some of the most incredible inventions the modern world has ever known. AC power, X-ray technology, radio, and most controversial, free energy.
What sort of voltage is this one?
It's 1,000,000 volts.
Whoa.
Although Tesla was naive in lots of ways, I think he genuinely was a genius.
Tesla was one of the most amazing engineering inventors of his century.
So what we have here is a cage of death.
Why do I not like the sound of this?
He sowed the seeds for radio, he had the major patents. He sowed the seeds for radar, the radio control. If you look at his list about what he called the world system, you go, hang on, that's our world now.
He was brilliant in his imagination. He thought outside the box all the time. Probably what Tesla didn't have was the follow-through.
It's like being in the eye of the storm, seeing the lightning blasting off in your face. It's extraordinary. That's the most extraordinary thing I've ever done. Now, many people believe that Nikola Tesla was hampered, shut down, and eventually killed by forces in America who were opposed to his plans for free electricity and telephony. And when you consider that those two industries alone have made several $1 trillion over the past 100 years or so, you begin to understand the motives for stopping him at all costs.
Tesla's biggest, most famous discovery was the simplest. Harnessed natural resources and make them available as energy for the entire world. But you can imagine that never got off the ground. Why would someone let free product get produced when the likes of General Electric and other companies have one objective: profit? Needless to say, free energy has been suppressed to this day.
Nikola Tesla was born in 1856 in what's today's Croatia. As a young man, he began working for the Edison Company in France, designing and making improvements to electrical equipment. Then, in June 1884, Tesla relocated to New York City, reputedly arriving with only 4 cents in his pocket, and not quite 30 years old, he was given the task of redesigning the Edison Company's direct current generators. He was, as some remarked at the time, a bona fide genius, but a strange one.
Tesla was a very strange man in all sorts of ways. He was almost certainly autistic. His brain was wired up differently than most of our brains are. He had an incredible memory. I mean, totally photographic. Could remember an entire book, no problem. He was a man who rarely slept at all. He was a man who was obsessive-compulsive in all manner of ways. He could not sit down at a meal without working out the volumetric capacity of the bowl or plate from which he was eating. He had strange phobias. He could get himself into a literal fever if he saw a peach. He couldn't touch human hair. He was an oddity.
He would crunch each of his toes 100 times before he went to bed because it would stimulate thoughts so he would be productive in the morning. He refused to shake hands, and although he was a gentleman, he would just turn and get really nasty with people, and no one was quite sure why. He had a photographic memory, but was really, really peculiar. He worked precisely from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day and then ordered his dinner from the same gentleman, and that gentleman had to clean his silverware with 18 napkins. I mean, he had many, many of the symptoms today that we know about as being OCD, and this is what made him the quirky mad scientist that everyone thought he was.
Tesla believed in alternating current, or AC, which he thought was far superior to Edison's DC, or direct current. So, in 1887, he set up his own Tesla Electric Company, with a laboratory at 89 Liberty Street in Manhattan, where he constructed his famous alternating current induction motor. It was revolutionary and way ahead of its time.
He had a mind very similar to that of Leonardo da Vinci, in that it worked in many different directions simultaneously. But he was, in essence, an engineer. He thought like a physicist, but acted like an engineer. The greatest legacies he left to the world, almost certainly alternating current is one of those, as opposed to what existed before, which was the production of electricity through direct current. That was complicated because it was very difficult to push direct current a long way. So if you lived a long way from the power station, it was difficult for you to get your electric. Alternating current works in a different way, and so therefore it can be pushed much further. So that's clearly one of the greatest things that Tesla did.
Keith Tutt is an author who's researched and written about the curious genius that was Nikola Tesla.
He moved to New York when he was about 26. He'd already been working in Paris for Edison's company in Paris, and he wanted to hit the big time in America. America was where everything was happening. The potential for big money to be spent on big projects was there. I guess he felt that he could not just make his fortune, actually, because he was more of an idealistic person than that. He wanted to transform the world. He wanted to bring electricity to the world, and America was the place where it was happening.
So tell me a little bit more about some of the experiments that he was doing at the time.
His big thing, his first big thing was AC, alternating current electricity. And he had an experience in 1882 in a park where he claimed to have seen this idea of how alternating current could work in motors. And this was a huge advance. At the time, it was thought that the future of electricity was in DC, direct current. But Tesla firmly believed that AC was what was going to make electricity really liberate people, actually, and make commerce, industry possible, which is absolutely true and is actually what happened.
Needless to say, Tesla's invention of an AC motor and his ambitious plans for free energy made him an arch rival of his former boss, Thomas Edison, who was championing DC. They called it the Battle of the Currents.
Edison and Tesla were two totally different types of personality. Edison, to some extent, was in the pocket of the big business organizations that were buying his work, buying his inventions, buying his technology, whereas Tesla was an idealist and a dreamer, and those two personalities clashed. And now we pay quarterly or monthly, or even by putting a coin in the slot, for what Edison was responsible for, whereas had Tesla succeeded, we would be able to enjoy free electricity.
He was working on ways in which electricity could be moved wirelessly, is that right?
Yes, he was. Once he had, he'd been given the contract to electrify Niagara Falls, a massive project, and he had successfully achieved that. And this gave him a platform to do things that he really wanted to do. And his big dream was to make electricity freely available to everyone at any point on the planet. And he had two main ideas for doing this. One of them was electricity through the atmosphere, and the other was actually electricity through the ground, so that one could simply stick a pole in, if you like, a receiver, and receive limitless amounts of electricity anywhere on the planet.
Tesla was a fantastic showman, traveling across the state, dazzling his audiences with his million-volt Tesla coils. Today, people across the world recreate his experiments, and I've arranged to see something similar here in Gloucester.
Hi.
Hi there.
Mark. The Tesla King.
Welcome to our high voltage world.
Nice to see you. This is it, right?
This is the Tesla coil, yes.
OK. Can we see, fire it up?
Of course you can. This is the solid state one. So this uses switches to turn it on and off.
OK.
Let me turn it on for you.
Go on.
He came up with a wonderful idea of putting an enormous copper ball on top of a 200-foot tower and then charging it. And he did, and he produced discharges like lightning that was 130 feet long. And then the whole thing blew up and his experiment came to an end.
So is it dangerous?
It is dangerous. It's about 500,000 volts, 400 to 500,000. If you can just step back, please, that'd be great.
OK. I'm going to stay with you.
So what we do? Whoa. That's it in test mode. So we're testing the system to make sure it works.
OK.
And now if we give it full power...
Right. Whoa!
So that's 400,000 volts.
It's very noisy.
It is noisy. You've noticed, haven't you?
I've noticed. And why is it that kind of purple colour? Why is
So
that?
the air is made up mostly of nitrogen. When you excite nitrogen and give it power, the electrons jump onto state, and as they come back again, it gives you a little flash. And that flash of light is always purple. If we had an argon atmosphere or another gas, it'd give you a different colour.
Right, OK. So can we just shut that one down a sec? Wow, OK. And this is its big brother, right?
This is the big brother, yeah.
OK. What sort of voltage is this one?
It's 1,000,000 volts.
Whoa. So mains voltage is what, 220?
Yep.
220 volts? That's 1,000,000. What would happen? Would I get a shock off that?
Yeah, you would die. You don't want to be anywhere near that. And that's a 3-metre spark, so it's quite a beast.
OK. It's a little bit like something out of a Frankenstein movie.
It is. It's exactly. It is that kind of technology.
I shall kill you mere mortals with my electricity power. OK. Can we fire this bad boy up?
What I want to demonstrate to you is that lightning through the air, it actually pushes electricity out. And we're going to demonstrate that by having some fluorescent tubes there, which suck up that power without being connected to it.
Hang on, I don't know. Just explain that to me again. So this is like, you're talking about wireless...
A wireless system. This was wireless back in Tesla's day.
OK.
So he was trying to set up systems which actually gave you wireless power.
Right. Was there any truth that he was working on building a network of these coils that would allow electricity to be passed essentially from, place to place?
Well, the coil would have been, generally speaking, the generator.
Right.
That would be sending the power out to these different receiving stations.
And was he successful in doing this?
Well, it's really questionable the level of success that he had with this great plan. He had some success, he claimed success, and he had patents which cover this activity.
So we need to talk about some safety features. The hazards we have here are, high voltage electricity going through the air. If you've got a pacemaker or any implants, electronic implants,
Not that I know
be
of.
stopped with it.
OK.
It gives off a lot of nitrogen dioxide and things like that into the air, so after a while we'll vent the place and get rid of some of the nasty fumes and do that.
Right. Okay.
Safety distance for a beast like this is around about 5 metres.
Right, OK. Well, I'm going to go and stand...
You stand over there. I'm
corner.
going to set these tubes up so you can see what it looks like.
So you said this is 1,000,000 volts?
Yes.
Now, I know because I had to change my car battery the other day, and that's 6 volts.
Yes.
So this is...
Quite a bit more. I'm going to turn the power on slowly. So we're coming on. So you see that they're not connected to any part of the power.
That's
It's sucking up power from the air and they're turning on. Wireless power transmission.
So he really was onto something, Tesla. I mean,
He was.
Tesla knew what he was...
So then as we bring the power up,
That is so noisy. It's like we're manufacturing lightning. Yeah, you're literally I've gone a bit that's just me reacting normally. That's fear, isn't it?
Yeah, it is partly fear, but there is loads of static in the air, loads of power in the air.
Because I'm feeling like I'm getting goosebumps. I can feel like my hair on the back of my neck standing up here. That is amazing.
There were two sides to Tesla's mind. The one side, the side we remember best, was of the brilliant inventor thinking of strange, new ways of using electrical power. But the other side of him was a great humanitarian, an idealist, a man who wanted to provide free energy for everyone so that we could use it, enjoy it, make the most of it. And that did not go down well with the big businesses who were supplying electricity at a cost. It was as though it would take from them the commodity they were selling, and they felt threatened. This was why Tesla never succeeded financially.
As curious as it might sound, Tesla has fans and devotees around the world today who like to replicate his experiments, including the Faraday cage. There's a man in Australia who calls himself Dr. Electricity. He's a doctor by day, but at night fires up his Tesla coils and puts on a huge light show for his neighbours.
Peter, why do you do this? Why do you go into your garden and unleash 500,000 volts?
Like
the Sir Edmund Hillary answer, because it was there, sort of springs to mind. But it's just something I've enjoyed since I was young, and as I started to do my own stuff, the internet came along, and I began to put that on the internet, and sort of found like I can do things that other people aren't doing. So it sort of grew from there, and sort of became more enthusiastic about the website and other people seeing it. So yeah, it's built up, and I just enjoy that sort of that power and the energy of it all. And same way that people enjoy power and energy in other forms, racing and so on.
And what do your patients make of what you do?
Well, a lot of them have heard or seen or on TV or just in pictures in my waiting room. Their response is, varies from he's really a bit crazy, That's one person's response to. But yes, it varies from incredulity to sort of frowning and nodding the head.
Listen, Peter, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for talking to me.
Not a problem.
OK, you take care.
OK, thanks a lot, Tim.
Bye, Peter. Bye.
See you.
In May 1899, Tesla moved to Colorado Springs to work on the high-frequency, high-voltage experiments for which he became best known. Using vast Tesla coils, he created artificial lightning, discharging millions of volts of electricity up to 135 feet. And, as you could understand, it caused quite a stir in the surrounding area.
According to reports from the time, the electrical discharge sounded like a huge thunderclap, which could be heard 15 miles away. And people claim to have seen huge flashes and sparks of light coming from Tesla's laboratory high on a hill. It was crude and it was dramatic, but Tesla had created working, wireless electricity.
At Colorado Springs, Tesla felt he had the opportunity to really develop the magnifying transmitter, the equipment to produce huge voltage, high-frequency electricity. This was all a development he expected to take forward into the wireless transmission of electricity, and he carried out experiments there that did enable the wireless transmission of electricity. He set up a field of light bulbs, just light bulbs not connected to anything, just stuck in the ground, and the power of the induction that was coming out of his coils actually lit these lights in the darkness.
That's a pretty cool trick.
It's a great trick.
Even today, that would be impressive.
It would be, it would be.
So he was proving that it was possible to transmit electricity wirelessly.
Yes, through electromagnetic induction. I mean, that has a die-off in the sense that he was only doing it to a certain extent, and then the question comes, what happens when you try and do that across a huge area? Well, in his case, he
Did he try and do that?
Well, he did it across a large area, pretty large area, and horses started to skip about because their horseshoes were actually starting to react with the ground. So it was not entirely safe.
So he caused quite a stir then in the town.
He caused a huge stir. The great thing for him at Colorado Springs was that he had unlimited amounts of electricity. That's why he went there. In fact, he had a deal with the local power source. Unfortunately, he blew up the power station at least once.
As well as wireless electricity experiments in Colorado, Tesla was also fascinated by X-ray technology and developed a cold cathode tube to take primitive X-ray photographs. He was also an early pioneer in radio waves before Marconi, setting up a temporary lab in the Gerlach Hotel in Manhattan to test out his inventions. And in 1898, Tesla demonstrated the world's first radio-controlled boat at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The crowd that witnessed the demonstration was astonished, and rumors about how he did it ranged from his use of black magic and telepathy to the boat being piloted by a trained monkey hidden inside.
So the next part from this, if you want to do something a bit more exciting, is how about we put you in a cage? How would you like to feel that power?
What do you mean?
Well, we can set up a cage for you. You can stand inside the cage and we'll shoot lightning at you. So you can see it up front and personal. Do you fancy doing that?
Well, you're going to fire that at me?
Yes. So we'll put you in a cage. It'll be perfectly safe.
You just said that could kill you and it's 1,000,000 volts.
Yeah, so there's something called Faraday's principle. Faraday was a man who discovered the effect that electricity likes to go round objects rather than through them. So if we put you in a metal cage, the metal cage conducts electricity much better than you do.
Right.
And therefore it goes around the out of the cage rather than all the way through you. A bit does go through you, but you don't die.
That's theory you're talking.
That's theory, yeah. I mean, it's well proved. I mean, only one person's ever died from it, so...
OK, I'll do it.
Are
you heavily insured?
Yeah. About 1 million. How much you would?
Go on then, let's do it. I'm in.
So what we have here is a cage of death.
Right, OK. Why do I not like the sound of this?
Do you want to try that for size?
I don't think I'm going to get in that, am I?
Yeah, we'll squeeze you in.
Really? OK.
Looks like one of those Iron Maidens.
Yeah. It looks like a kind of spooky, massive jelly baby.
Let me take out the safety foam.
OK.
That insulates you from the floor. Step in, sir.
I got a bad feeling about this.
So, hands by your side.
Right.
Head back.
OK. Ah!
Well, it's quite tight, isn't it?
Well, all right, not that tight. Ah.
Try not to touch the sides.
Well, I can't...
I reckon that'll work.
I can't not touch the sides. I'm kind of squashed in now.
Well, he was a born showman. He was very much a Barnum and Bailey type. And one of his favourite tricks was to get inside a Faraday cage and then, using the same principle as those machines that we've all seen in the physics lab when we were schoolboys and girls, that the electricity, static electricity, completely harmless, would radiate from him in a most spectacular manner. And people at his period who didn't realise that it was harmless and who lived in an era when criminals were executed with an electric chair were thinking that Tesla was surviving what would seem to them to be an absolutely fatal process. And of course, he loved the acclaim and he loved to mystify his audience.
Are you sure this is going to protect me from the... It's 1,000,000 volts.
Yeah, 1,000,000 volts. So Faraday's principle is that it's easier for the electricity to go around the outside through the skin of this rather than through you, because this conducts electricity much better than you do.
OK. I'm aware that I'm touching the edges. Is that going to be a problem?
Yeah, that's not ideal. No, what I'll do, seriously, anything you're unhappy with, if you feel any tingling sensations, hands on your head and we'll stop immediately.
How can I put my hands on my head? I can't even move.
You'll be fine. Do you have any fillings?
No.
Excellent. No watches?
Well, yeah.
Phones?
Yes, all of these things. A microphone, a watch.
So we try not to have metallic things inside the cage at any stage.
OK. So you're going to fire that straight at me?
We're going to fire it, yeah. And you can actually see, cameras come and have a little look, there's burn marks from where we've done it before.
Would it be churlish at this stage to say, don't try this at home?
So I'll put 2 safety earths on you, so you're well earthed.
Good.
And we'll turn it on.
Hang on. Are we sure this is a good idea? Don't I get, like, a last meal or anything like that? Maybe a message for my kids? Tell them I love them. Will you tell my kids I love them?
Set me on.
Good. See what, the first person... Oh! First person to try this was a brave man. OK. Oh, it feels a little tingly. So far, so good. Keep it up, come on, higher, more.
If we can imagine Tesla himself inside his Faraday cage, and on either side of it, these gigantic Tesla coils, and then the spark would fly a distance of many feet from one coil towards the other, and the Faraday cage in the middle, with the man in the cage looking as if he was being cooked alive. And he is unharmed. He is completely untouched by all of this that's going on around him. It looks impossible.
Oof. How was that for you? Oh, that was extraordinary. My goodness, you can feel like that. You can feel the heat sparking off your face. You can feel the heat, and you can see like lightning bolts coming at you. It's like
feel the tingliness on your skin.
Yeah. I've still got that. It's like being in the eye of the storm, seeing the lightning blasting off in your face. It's extraordinary. That's the most extraordinary thing I've ever done.
Tesla's grandest plan yet was to build a huge tower in Wardenclyffe on Long Island in New York that was to transmit free and wireless electricity around the world using other huge transmitters that he was going to build in other countries. As you can imagine, it was an ambitious project, and he struggled to get the funding for it.
So what was he working on at Wardenclyffe?
Wardenclyffe was the site that he chose on Long Island, on the east coast of America, to build a 187-foot tower which had a magnifying transmitter within it, and he wanted to send radio signals across the Atlantic. He had this huge desire to make radio and telephony and communications possible across the world. And he managed to get some funding to do this. And he was successful up to a point, and the point was Marconi managed to send the first radio signal from Cornwall across to Newfoundland, and that really actually put a big stop on Tesla's funding.
So when it comes to Marconi and to Edison, Tesla's sounding a bit like a nearly man. You know, he was always just that close.
He was a nearly man in certain ways. I mean, I don't think you can say that about AC electricity. He was the man who electrified Niagara Falls. In fact, with radio, he had 17 patents prior to Marconi. And Marconi used Tesla's 17 radio patents to achieve what he achieved. It was only in the year of Tesla's death in 1943, that it was acknowledged that it was actually Tesla's patents that had made radio possible.
He was brilliant in his imagination. He was brilliant at, you know, putting ideas together. He thought outside the box all the time, maybe too much. He wasn't a businessman. He wasn't very personable. He didn't get on with people. He didn't follow through any contacts he might have. I mean, he fell out big time with Edison, for example. And probably what Tesla didn't have was the follow-through. He came up with brilliant ideas on paper. He conceived of amazing things, some of which have yet to be followed through, invented properly, but he just couldn't follow them through himself. He couldn't build them, or if he did, they fell apart or something happened to them. He didn't have much luck, actually.
After the disaster in Wardenclyffe, Tesla was a broken man and in serious financial difficulty. But he continued inventing with plans for a radar system, a vertical takeoff biplane, and even a ray gun. Unfortunately, none of them came to fruition, and he died, impoverished and alone, in the New Yorker hotel on the 7th of January 1943. New York journalist Kim Mantz is a self-confessed Tesla groupie and takes people on tours of the main Tesla landmarks in the city, including the actual suite in the hotel where he died.
So it's in these two adjoining rooms that Nikola Tesla lived the last 10 years of his life. He actually died here too, in the New Yorker hotel. And it's not unusual because he actually lived out his entire adult life in New York City hotel rooms. So it was a kind of interesting existence, but he did a lot of experiments and crazy things in there, and also had a big man-sized safe full of all of his documents that actually got seized by the FBI when he died, because they wanted to make sure that the nation would stay secure with whatever secrets that he was coming up with. So they actually went through all of his stuff here and then brought it out. I don't know if there are any misconceptions about Tesla. He was pretty straightforward with how out there he was with all his ideas, and he was so proud of them. You know, Edison always said, like, if it doesn't make money, I won't invent it. And Tesla said, if I ever get as much money coming in the doors, I'm throwing out the window on new experiments and ideas, then I'll be a wealthy man. So he was fully owning the whole Thor's hammer thing and his persona that he had built up. But he also really believed in what he was saying, so he wasn't just doing it to be eccentric. But if you can imagine, in 1906, Tesla was describing a wireless cell phone in a time when people were using huge switchboards and multiple operators and cranks and things like that. He was talking about being able to wirelessly carry around a telephone device, and that an operator wouldn't need any specific knowledge of how to use the device for using it. So it's pretty cool. He was saying stuff like that back then. You could see why they would think that he was a little nutty.
The last year or so of Tesla's life it's a heartbreaking story. He's living in a small room in a New York hotel. Keep in mind, he's never had a love or a woman in his life, and the highlight of his day is going and feeding the pigeons. Not just any pigeons. He had particular pigeons that he was fond of and would spend lots of money on. So it was a very tragic situation, especially since the first Wall Street, the first crash of the financial markets caused his biggest funder to stop what would have been his most revolutionary project, the tower that would have given the world free energy. So he died, and hardly anyone took notice.
Why did he die in poverty?
Yeah, he died in poverty as a result of these bad deals that he'd done. He accepted to give up royalties on electric horsepower produced on his patents. He would have been a multi-millionaire at that time, but he gave it all up for $216,000 at a time when he needed enormous amounts of money to do the research that he wanted to do.
He may have died in 1943, but the spirit and inventions of Tesla live on. Today, there are thousands of amateur inventors and Tesla enthusiasts all over the world. And every year, a small group meets in Nottingham in England to attend an event called Gaussfest, where they swap tips, show off their coils, and spark up all manner of Tesla-inspired devices.
I'm Derek Woodruff and I organise a couple of the Tesla coil events in the UK. I build Tesla coils. My speciality is the electronic coils, but we've also got people here who have built the more classic sort of Tesla coils that Tesla himself would probably recognise, not a lot dissimilar to what he was playing with.
My name's Chris, and I'm a chartered electrical engineer, and I work for a large engineering company here in the UK. What I brought along today is a plasma ball, which you can buy from a hobbyist or novelty shops, and I use the plasma ball to illuminate ordinary household fluorescent tubes in a normal way, in an unusual way, rather. And what I do is I use myself as a human conductor. I put my hand on the plasma ball, charge myself up to high voltage, and light fluorescent tubes with my bare hands. I did audition for Britain's Got Talent some years ago, but unfortunately I didn't make it through to appear on television. But nevertheless, it was a lot of fun.
I'm Dave Bullymore, and I'm a Tesla coiler, and I'm here at the Nottingham Gaussfest in 2014. Oh, Tesla was a genius. He was way ahead of his time, and it wouldn't be too much of an exaggeration to say he more or less invented the modern world. He developed the AC electricity concept, and that's how modern world is run. He had this idea for what he called the world system, which was a series of transmitting towers built near generating stations, and it would avoid the need to have wires going to people's houses. They would basically tap the energy using a giant receiving aerial. I think the reason it failed was they realised they wouldn't be able to charge the customers for the electricity. Anybody could just help themselves to it.
Some people say that, that the reason that Tesla became embittered and died in poverty was because he genuinely was just a dreamer, that a lot of his ideas came to nothing. But you have to look at Tesla, the engineer, to see the things he did actually achieve. He did make a cosmic collector. He was able to project energy across vast distances without any kind of wiring. There were teething problems. He blew up several power stations by accident. But that alone proves that something was happening.
He certainly produced some strange and fascinating effects in his laboratory and in the whole area around his laboratory that seemed to suggest he was onto something. Whether that was actually viable, nobody knows because it hasn't been followed up. But you know, there's huge reasons or huge motives not to follow those ideas up in case they work. You wouldn't actually have to suppress the technology. You just have to, you know, once Tesla died, just not bother to research it anymore.
By all accounts, Nikola Tesla was an enigma and a genius. On the one hand, he was a socially awkward and difficult man who preferred the company of pigeons to humans. On the other, he was a driven scientist who worked nearly 20 hours a day to create his electrical inventions. And yet the questions remain about his legacy. Was he deliberately hampered in his plans to offer the world a network of freely available electricity and radio communication towers? Did the big American corporations decide his ideas were too dangerous to their profits to let him succeed? Or was he just the victim of his own hubris and ambition?
Tesla never got the recognition he deserved. At the beginning of his career, he was exploited by Edison. At the end of his career, it was J.P. Morgan and many others in between. He would quip when new inventions would come out attributed to somebody else. Hey, wait a second, that used 17 of my patents. But it did no good. Nobody wanted to know. He was the mad scientist, not a businessman.
What's Tesla's legacy? What will history remember him for?
I think really particularly for AC, alternating current, polyphase electricity. Sounds like a complicated name, but it's actually what makes the electrification of this city, major cities all over the world, the transmission of power possible. That is what Tesla did. He did a lot of other things as well. He sowed the seeds for radio. He had the major patents. He sowed the seeds for radar. He did radio control. If you look at his list about what he called the world system, he wanted to create a world system of communication. If you read through it, you go, hang on, that's our world now.
I think you could safely say that Tesla was a fantastic scientist and just an awful businessman. He was exploited all the time. Edison waved a carrot of, I think it was $50 if he did this or that and discovered this unbelievable sort of machine that he needed to do certain things in his company. And Tesla did, and he never got paid. And that was the story throughout his entire career. People were nicking his patents and absolutely just taking advantage of everything he did because they had more money and a greater opportunity to exploit it.
The tragedy of Tesla's life, and we need to remember that he died impoverished and alone, was that it almost seems as if there was a conspiracy of big business working against him to shut him down and to make certain that he and those who had invested with him lost everything, and that it was to the, what we might call, Edisonian angle that the future developments turned. It's an awful tragedy when we think that his idealism was wasted and how different our society could be today if people had gone with Tesla instead of with Edison and the big business.
Now, despite all his experiments into free energy, Nikola Tesla will probably be best remembered 100 years from now for being the inspiration behind one of the fastest growing car companies in the world, the Tesla electric car. Certainly not free, but it is a hell of a lot of fun. I'll see you next time.